Hello guys, it's Salvaje. Here are 25 ninja tips for Fortnite Save the World. My supporter creator code is Salvaje. If you want to rock it, that would be highly appreciated. Of course guys, these videos take a lot of time to make, so also a like on the video is appreciated. Okay, so chances are that if you're watching this, you want to learn more about ninjas, or you want to main ninjas and save the world, or you just want ninja tips. So these next 25 tips are going to include things that you should know, just some extra tactics that every ninja should sort of follow, and just a lot of useful tips in general. So with that said, let's get started. The smoke bomb, in my opinion, one of the best ways to use it is when you're surrounded by a lot of husks, just drop it on the ground and then of course start swinging your sword around. That is tip number one. And the reason why you want to do that is because like that you're going to be able to sort of manage a crowd of husks sort of easier. You don't want to be using a smoke bomb on one target, for example. And I just want to point out that this tip number one is very essential, specifically at the end game levels of play where you're gonna have a lot of husk and you need to be dishing out a lot of damage to of course put down those high health targets. Tip number two, if you're going to use Ninja Star, don't use it on a single target unless of course you're closing the distance between them. We're going to talk about that later, but for the most part it should be common knowledge that Ninja Stars will actually pierce the husk by default. I'm putting this tip on the video because this is something that not a lot of people are aware of, since in the past Ninja Stars didn't pierce multiple husks. Tip number three, ninjas, they don't take any fall damage. You can fall off from any distance and you won't be taking any fall damage. That's common knowledge that everyone should know. Tip number four, use Kunai Storm to reposition yourself. So let's say that you have a lot of husk around you and you also want to do some damage as you're changing your location. Just jump once, use Kunai Storm, and on the second jump, just jump out of the way so that you have a better advantage over the husk, and of course, you're not completely overwhelmed. Tip number five, if you are using the hoverboard and you're gonna get off the hoverboard, jump, deactivate your hoverboard and then press jump again so you move a little bit quicker, and this usually is going to be helping you out when it comes down to speed running those destroy the encampment missions. Tip number six, did you know that you can actually throw the smoke bomb after you jump? So ideally, something that I like to do against refrigerator husk is I like to jump once, throw the smoke bomb, and then jump again, because the refrigerator door on the refrigerator husk has a huge hitbox, and usually doing this is going to make it so that that refrigerator doesn't really hit me in the knees. Tip number seven, make sure that you are always lining up as many husks as possible when you're going to be using the Dragon Slash ability. Tip number eight, make sure that you're using the double jump that the ninjas have. Ideally, you always want to be using double jump to reposition yourself at angles where the husks are not going to overwhelm you, or of course to get from one quick spot in the objective to the other, specifically if your teammates need help. It might sound like a basic tip, but the number one cause that on why a lot of ninja players die is because they don't use double jump. Tip number nine, don't double jump and then use Kunai Storm. If you want to maximize Kunai Storm, don't jump from really high and also use Kunai Storm either. For the most part, you want to be using Kunai Storm as close to the ground as possible, because that's what is going to drop a concentrated amount of kunais to actually do some pretty decent concentrated damage. Tip number 10, if you're playing a ninja, you should always be fighting in the front line, even at the high-end levels of play, as I have demonstrated on multiple amount of gameplays that I've posted in the channel. The reason why you always want to be fighting where the husks are spawning or close to where the husks are spawning is because like that you take away a lot of pressure from your teammates. Tip number 11, since you're always going to be in the front line, you might as well always make sure that you're taking out some threatening miss monsters like blasters, for example. Tip number 12, a really good support ninja to have if you are rocking a melee build is Whiteout Fiona. Whiteout Fiona is a must-have, and I'm pretty sure she's going to become part of the base Save the World game in Season 10. Just want to point that out. Tip number 13, a really good ninja at the high-end levels of play to also have as a support ninja is Alchemist Sarah. She gives you the ability to throw down a smoke bomb, and then the smoke bomb is actually going to be healing you. Very, very effective and extremely overpowered if of course you're using tip number 1. Tip number 14, the best team perk for ninjas at the time of me making this video is the Dim Mak perk. Alright, every time that you activate Shadow Stance or get a melee kill, you're going to be receiving a lot of shield. And the best part about the Dim Mak team perk is that every Save the World player has it, and as you guys can see in this gameplay example, I'm getting a lot of melee kills and my shields are just being regenerated extremely quickly. This perk is very, very useful, specifically at the high-end levels of play. Tip number 15, use the Tail of the Dragon ability that Snuggle Specialist Sarah brings into the table in a concentrated area or in an area where a lot of the husks are going to go into. And the reason why you want to use that Tail of the Dragon ability in an area that husks are about to go into or in a concentrated area is because like that you're always getting that little bit of extra damage to the husk, and it definitely helps out at the high levels of play. I know it sounds a bit complicated, but the gameplay example of course should be showing you guys what I mean. Tip number 16, listen, you're a ninja, you have the double jump, you can move very quickly. Your number one priority should also be to always take out enemy lobbers. Lobbers are extremely annoying. At the time of making this video, they have perfect accuracy on players and the objective, so it is your job to take out lobbers at any level of play. Tip number 17, what are some, good weapons to have if you are playing a ninja other than a melee weapon? Me personally, I like to run a shotgun, or for the third weapon, I usually like to have a high amount of damage type weapon, a weapon that can dish out some pretty decent damage. And the reason for that is because sometimes I want to whip out my weapon and damage an enemy that's far away for example, or very, very close to me, and of course that's when I'm going to be taking out my shotgun. Tip number 18, as a ninja, you are probably going to have a lot of control over the area that you're guarding, specifically if you're guarding the front lines. However, if you have another teammate in the front lines with you, that means that you're not being as effective as possible. You always want to make sure that if you're playing a ninja, that you're guarding the front line by yourself. Again, you want to take out as much pressure as possible from your team, from the objective, and the way you're going to do that is by guarding the front lines alone by yourself. You could get a little bit of help, by the way, at the higher level missions, like another ninja, for example. That would be really great. But for the most part, my beginner players, my intermediate level players, my high-end low twine peak players, definitely make sure, guys, that if you're guarding an area with a ninja, that you are in that area by yourself taking out husks as they spawn. Because if you've got extra health, that means you can either go to another area that's unguarded, or, well, I guess you could also stay in that area. Tip number 19, when you're out of energy and you can't really use an ability, or you can't really use your sword heavy attack, that's the situation where you want to take out your weapon, right? So a high burst damage weapon like a Bundlebuss, for example, or a long range weapon like the Wraith Assault Rifle, which is going to be part of the base game soon. Long story short, that's why I always want to have a ranged weapon with me in my ninja loadouts. I don't want to run all three melee weapons because sometimes I'm going to need that range, and I want the right weapon, of course, for that range when necessary. Tip number 20, let's talk about some gadgets that you usually want to be running with the ninja. So for the most part, I like to run the turret when I'm playing ninja. I like to drop the turret in the air, and then I like to take out husk as the turret helps me. I usually like to do this when an area is getting really crowded, when I feel like I might be overrun by husk and my abilities aren't really coming back too quickly. That's where I usually drop one turret. Now, another tip that I like to do with the ninja, specifically at the high-end levels of play, is I like to drop 2 turrets on a specific spawn that I am basically covering, and then I like to go from spawn B to spawn A, and of course take out a lot of enemies over there. Like that, I can take away a lot of pressure from my team in 2 spawns. I'm going to have 2 turrets on 1 spawn, of course, taking out a lot of the weak husk, making the big high health husk a little bit vulnerable so the trap tunnel finishes them. And then I'm going to be on spawn number A, also taking away a lot of pressure from my team as I'm playing the ninja on that specific spawn. Tip number 21, let's talk about another gadget that's really helpful. The slow field. I really like to use the slow field with the ninjas. I don't really use them as much. I'm mostly running Adrenaline Rush and the turret. But from time to time, specifically at the high twine missions, the slow field is almost a must, guys. Sometimes you're going to be really, really overwhelmed, and you don't really need the adrenaline rush because maybe you have your campfires leveled up already or your healing pads. Long story short, you want to drop the slow field when you have a lot of husk around you, and that's going to help you out taking out, all of the husk, since the husk movement is going to be decreased. Also, the slow field also helps out when it comes down to mini bosses. Tip number 2. So, A lot of people sometimes say that ninja stars are really bad. Not really. They just don't know how to use ninja stars. See, ninja stars can actually be used to destroy and weaken the shielder husk. In other words, the husk that give a shield over the high health target sometimes, or low health target sometimes. So that's one of the uses that I have for ninja stars. Tip number 23, and this is a really important tip, specifically when there's a mist monster that you're about to fight, like a blaster, for example. As you're double jumping towards the mist monster like a blaster, or as you're jumping towards the high health target like a husky husk, you want to double jump and then you want to throw your ninja stars, or you just want to be on the ground, throw your ninja stars, weaken the target from range, and then you want to finish off the target with the sword. That's why I really like ninjas that have the throwing star ability, because it gives you a lot of utility when you're pushing high health targets like a blaster, for example, or a smasher, specifically at the lower levels of play and the high end levels of play where damage is sometimes really important. Tip number 24, guys, don't build a trap tunnel on the front lines right where the husks are spawning if you plan on playing a ninja, or if you have a ninja in your team, because what that's going to do is it's going to make the ninja not have a lot of movement in the front line, right? The trap tunnels should always be below, not below, behind the ninja, right? That's where you need to be placing the trap tunnels. Like that, all of the husks that go into the trap tunnels are really weakened, because of course your ninja is putting in work. And of course, tip number 25, let's talk about Tempest Kick. When I'm surrounded by a lot of husks, that's usually where I like to use Tempest Kick, so that I can stun them back, get some space, and of course finish them off with my sword. And those are 25 ninja tips. I made a poll in my community section. I asked you guys what are the next 25 tips that you want to see. Make sure that you vote for that poll. I hope you guys enjoyed this project. This is part of my 100 hero tips project, where I will be sharing with you guys a lot of tips for the subclasses. If you enjoyed the video, please guys drop it a like. I would really appreciate that. These videos don't really get made in like 10 minutes. And subscription would also help out, my friends. And a support a creator code usage, well, that'd be great. Thank you for going the extra mile if you'll go ahead and do that. See you guys in the next one. I hope you guys learned a lot and have fun playing the ninja class.